What's going on? Welcome to the Shonee Jackson Show. Thank you for watching. I ask that you like and subscribe to the YouTube page and follow me on all the socials at Shonee Jackson. Today, we're going to have a Dallas Cowboys NFL kind of off-season and little preview to what I think of the Cowboys going into this season. And obviously, first and foremost, going to address the quarterback situation. Dak Prescott going into the last year of his deal without an extension. What I think about that, where the Cowboys stand, where Dak stands, and his leverage, and kind of the stalemate that exists there right now. That only time will tell what will happen, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on it and kind of what I think about what the expectations are this season, what we want to accomplish, what can be accomplished, and then what may what the future may hold for not only the Dallas Cowboys but Dak Prescott, whether that be in Dallas or elsewhere. So let's go ahead and get right into it. From the Dak Prescott standpoint, like I mentioned, he's going into the last year of his contract without an extension. All right. And obviously, that is probably the talk of the offseason in NFL circles, especially, amongst free agency players, things of that nature. I don't know if there's anything that's ever talked about the Dallas Cowboys and their franchise quarterback, especially going into a year where not only he is on the last year of his deal, but your head coach is on the last year of his deal. The defensive coordinator that you just hired is on a one-year contract. Obviously, CD Lamb is in a potential holdout situation. All kinds of things. And then there is the all-in comments that were made by Jerry Jones that have sparked fires, if you will, and triggered a lot of people, not only Dallas Cowboys fans, but Dallas Cowboys haters, and kind of how that has existed this offseason. And I'm definitely going to give my thoughts on that as well. But Dak Prescott, the Dallas Cowboys are set to face a $55 million cap hit without an extension this year. And I think it's very obvious sitting here today on June 24th, training camp right around the corner, that I don't think that extension happens this season or during the season, barring, I think, just a total explosion from him. Maybe something just gets done. You just give him what he wants. But, I think at the end of the day, Dak Prescott is looking at a situation where he was an All-Pro for the very first time of his career last year and the runner-up for the MVP. He by far had the best season of his career. He had 4,500 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 72.7 QBR. He was second in the league with a QBR rating, first in passing touchdowns, and third in passing yards. Very phenomenal season. And I want to say that this is not going to be, a picking of sides, if you will. You could definitely say I'm doing that, but more so just going to give you my perspective as a Cowboys fan of 27 years. My perspective really in general on the quarterback position and what it takes at that position and as a team as a whole to honestly win Super Bowls in the modern era of football, the salary cap structure the way it is, and just really what you look at, if you look at the last decade, what it shows us, there's clear recipes to winning in this league, and I don't think that the Cowboys have necessarily followed that, and yet we've done a lot right in winning 36 games in the last 3 years. And I think that there's more than half of the GMs in this league that would happily swap rosters or spots from where they're at with the Dallas Cowboys in their current situation, where we have 9 AP All-Pros on the roster, right? But getting back to the main focus, not to get too scatterbrained, I have plenty of time to get into all that stuff. Dak Prescott, obviously you have leverage when you're coming off the best year of your career. But in the Dallas Cowboys standpoint, and from my point of view, you're only as good as your last performance, right? And that was a 48-32 loss, humiliating fashion to Green Bay, where Dak Prescott, for lack of a better term, was drowning for 4 quarters. The numbers don't tell the story on Dak. He was 41 of 60. Yes, 60 passing attempts. We were constantly chasing behind. The game felt over. I think in the second quarter when he threw that pick six and went down 28-7, I think it was at the time. Trauma is trauma. There's points that I remember. There's points that I probably blacked out in my brain. But 403 passing yards, 68.3 completion percentage, 6.7 yards per completion, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Could have been like 9 or 10 interceptions, really. There was 9 or 10 passes that touched Green Bay defensive backs' hands, and or CD Lamb had to defend himself from getting picked off, or other receivers had to go in and defend. I understand at times you're pressing and that type of stuff's going to happen, but god-awful playoff performance. Not his first one. 2-5 in the playoffs. The first San Francisco lost. The defense played more than well enough to win that football game. Dak Prescott could not outperform Jimmy Garoppolo and win that. Second playoff game, I don't think Dak played quite as bad, but he didn't play good enough either. You could look at every single playoff loss and say he was outperformed by the opposing quarterback. Might get into a little bit of that when I start talking about other quarterbacks that have been paid, that are going to be paid soon, and just other quarterbacks within the conference that I understand maybe weren't the MVP runner-ups last year, but I think most people are going to take over Dak Prescott. And I'm not saying that to say that I'm here to bash Dak Prescott and talk shit about him or say that he's not good. I think Dak Prescott is very, very good. You don't have the season that he had last year. You don't win 12 games. You're not the franchise quarterback of a team that's won 12 games 3 years in a row if you're a bad or mediocre quarterback. Like I said, I think he's good, but I don't think he's $60 million APY good, right? And the reports are out. It's clear as day that him and Todd France, the agent at Athletes First, wants to make Dak Prescott not only the highest paid player per year in the NFL, but the highest paid player per year in the history of the NFL. At what point can we quit doing this shit? Not only in Dallas with quarterbacks, not saying that we're going to do it or that it's what our MO is, but in general with the QB market, where it is that a guy is up for a deal, he's up for a contract, therefore, if you're going to keep him, he just has to be the highest paid guy in the world. When there is a clear and obvious number one in Patrick Mahomes and what they're doing in Kansas City, clear and obvious, the Michael Jordan of the current modern NFL is Patrick Mahomes. He's won 3 Super Bowls now, been to 4 in his very young career. Just an unbelievable. He is on his way on a fast track to being the greatest of all time. Right? So logic tells you he should just be the highest paid guy, is what it is. He's not. I understand. As your contract goes on and he's on a 10-year deal, that, that shit's just going to change. I would imagine that there's a restructure happening with him in the near future, but I digress. He's by far the best. And I think that you would go on the list and you would say that there's definitely at least 3 to 4 more guys that you would probably take before you take Dak Prescott going into his 30s now as a quarterback in this league. But let's pull up the list. I hope you're able to see this pretty well. It's going to be kind of small on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. If not, you're just listening, and I'll read it off. I got the list of the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. Starting at the top, you got a tie with Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence. Joe Burrow signed his deal after taking his team to the Super Bowl, a team that the Dallas Cowboys manhandled in that regular season. If you remember, I think we sacked Joe Burrow like 11 times, if that's the same game I recall. They go on. He gets hot in the playoffs. He does his Joe Cool thing, carries them to the Super Bowl, damn near fucking wins it, man. You go back to that Super Bowl, the last play of the game, if Aaron Donald doesn't do what Aaron Donald does, it's the greatest interior pass rusher, just greatest interior defensive lineman of all time, in my opinion, especially just from a pure dominant standpoint, man amongst boys type shit. He completely wrecked the last play of the game. Therefore, it blew up the play. Joe Burrow kind of had to just fling the ball in the air. Samaje Perine didn't give an effort to catch the ball. That's neither here nor there. Game ends right there. If that doesn't happen, I think Joe Burrow, in a legendary moment, hits his LSU teammate Jamar Chase on a deep ball. They score. They win the game. Unbelievable. One of the best. It would be one of the best Super Bowls won with less roster talent, if you will. Not that they weren't a good team. They were. But, the Dallas Cowboys have had rosters over the last 5 to 10 years that stomped that Cincinnati roster that went to the Super Bowl. And quite frankly, that maybe stomped the roster that just won the Super Bowl in Kansas City. Move on to Trevor Lawrence. He's the most recently signed quarterback. There's going to be a lot of noise out of especially Dak Prescott fans, camps, people that beat the table to go ahead and sign Dak, give him what he's asking for, that think he's one of the best in the league, top 3 guy. Trevor Lawrence is a guy that you'd point at and be like, how the hell can you justify signing Trevor Lawrence, but you're not going to give Dak Prescott what he wants? Well, first and foremost, I would say from the Jacksonville perspective, and what they are doing is they used the number 1 overall pick on Trevor Lawrence just a few years ago. I think that they look at his rookie year as a total wash because of the whole Urban Meyer debacle that happened there, right? Obviously, the development was put on a hold as a rookie, and that sucks, and that happens to guys. Sometimes you get drafted to the worst possible situation. Kind of happened there in Jacksonville. Rookie year's a wash. Had a very good second year with Doug Peterson in year 2. Year 3, up and down, not quite what you wanted, but obviously Trevor Lawrence was the number 1 quarterback in the country, number one player in the country coming out of high school. He's one of the most highly rated, one of the top three highest rated recruits of all time. He has a ceiling that is absolutely through the roof. And I think, in my perspective, is if you are going to break the bank and eat this much up of your salary cap with the quarterback, then you need to think he has the ceiling to be the best quarterback in the world. And I think that Jacksonville does think that. Doug Peterson thinks that. And that's why they did that. But also, on the other side of that, as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I would say, don't look at what Jacksonville Jaguars do as an organization, as a franchise, and what they're doing at the quarterback position, and copy or mimic them. Okay? Jacksonville's one of the worst franchises in league history, one of the newer franchises in the league. Understand that, but, they haven't had a ton of quarterback success throughout the history of their franchise, and I just wouldn't copy what they do as an organization and how they hand out contracts in Dallas. As you've won 36 games in 3 years, let's keep doing things for the most part as we've done them, and then maybe change a few other things that have kept us from winning a Super Bowl for the better part of 30 years. Moving on, Jared Goff. I am very high on Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is higher on the list than Dak Prescott. I would take Jared Goff in Dallas over Dak Prescott. That's not a shot at all. Jared Goff has been to a Super Bowl and to two conference championship games. Actually, I believe he's been to 3 conference championship games. As a matter of fact, he definitely has been to 3 NFC championship games. He beat Dallas in the divisional round one time to get to one that I think they lost. That's neither here nor there. He's obviously won more in the more important moments as a quarterback than Dak Prescott. He was the number 1 pick in the draft the same year as Dak. He was set and well on his way to having a record-breaking contract in LA before that Super Bowl happened, right? You can look at the Super Bowl that the Rams lost to the Patriots and point directly to Jared Goff missing opportunities being the reason that the Rams ultimately lost that game, which is what got the sense of urgency from Sean McVay to ultimately make the trade that they made to get Matthew Stafford and ultimately win that Super Bowl, right? So he was traded to Detroit, cast out to die to one of the worst, if not the worst franchise in the history of the NFL. Historically awful, cursed team. He gets sent to cast out to die with Dan Campbell in Detroit. Well, he doesn't die. They turn that thing around. They are a hair away from making the Super Bowl last year. Jared Goff played amazing all year long, incredibly effective. All he does is just execute offense, move the ball down the field, and win a lot of football games. He did that. If it wasn't for his coach and his ridiculous gambling at times where it's just completely unnecessary. And here's the thing, Dan Campbell, I like him just as much as the next guy. Quirky fucking guy, fan favorite, does all kinds of shit. Some of it's corny, some of it's not. That's for you to judge. He does the cute little shit where they wear the jersey in the draft. They wear his Lions jersey, all that shit. And he goes for it. Fans love that stuff. He trusts his players. And he uses that trust of players as a crutch for some of the stupid-ass decisions he's made. The regular season game against the Cowboys, which the Lions were still playing for the number 1 overall seed in the NFC at that point in time. Very, very important game for not only Detroit, but Dallas. They had taken all momentum in that game. We're stepping on the throat. They go down the field to score. They have a chance to go for 2 to win the game or kick the field goal and send it to overtime, right? I don't blame him for going for 2 initially. Go for 2. We got all the momentum. Let's step on their fucking throats. Let's end this game. I think that they had multiple formation penalties. The first one, I think, was a formation penalty. They end up getting it, but it gets called off because of a penalty. They go for 2 again. They don't get it. I think another penalty. They go for 2 again. They went for it like 3 or 4 times. At some point, there's the good old-fashioned story of the man that was sitting on the roof during a flood. A boat comes to pick him up. He's like, no, I'm good. God's going to protect me. The flood gets worse. Another boat comes to pick him up. He's like, no, I'm good. God's going to protect me. Third boat comes along. The flood's damn near neck high. Someone's like, hey, you going to get on this boat or you going to die? He's like, go on. God's going to protect me. Guy drowns and dies, gets to heaven, says, God, you were supposed to protect me. He says, I sent 3 boats, you dummy. That's kind of what I felt like with Dan Quinn in that situation in Dallas. Dude, you had 3 chances. They told you 3 times, don't go for 2. Kick the extra point. Let's go to overtime. He doesn't take it. That shouldn't be applauded. That's fucking stupid. Same thing with the San Francisco NFC Championship game. They had total control in that game. All the momentum in the world. Were playing good on both sides of the ball. They were in the lead, which I don't think Brock Purdy thrives in that situation as a player. Maybe the reason why, he isn't extended yet. Quite frankly, I don't even think they can extend him. I think he has to play into that third year before he can get an extension. But regardless, I don't think he plays great from behind. They end up going for it on like 4th and 8 or some stupid shit in midfield. They don't get it. Amon-Ra St. Brown or somebody drops the ball. San Fran gets the ball back, goes and scores, takes all momentum in that game, ends up winning the game. That's neither here nor there. Jared Goff, I think, has earned that money. And he's at $53 million per year. He's third highest in the league. He just signed that deal. He's already been surpassed, right? Justin Herbert. Now that's a questionable contract. He has a ceiling that is through the roof, but is obviously just as gotten a lot of praise from the moment he came into the league. I'm going to talk about Kellen Moore's sorry ass a little bit later, and we'll kind of discuss Justin Herbert's last year. He played 13 games a season ago and had the worst year of his career, by far. The Chargers were a disappointment. They brought in a new coach in Jim Harbaugh, who I'm very, very high on. Obviously, I think Jim Harbaugh is a fantastic fucking quarterbacks coach, if not one of the best in the world. He's done a lot with a lot less than Justin Herbert, so let's see what that looks like. But again, like I said earlier, you pay for ceiling, not floor, when you're paying a quarterback. So Justin Herbert, definitely in my eyes, higher ceiling and younger than Dak Prescott. Lamar Jackson, 2-time MVP. The only thing that stopped him from winning a Super Bowl is Patrick Mahomes. He won the MVP last year. I think he's going to keep competing for MVPs and Super Bowls, and will eventually win one there in Baltimore. Just too good of an organization, too consistent on defense, and he's an electric, amazing, one of the best, if not the second best quarterback in the NFL. Moving on, Jalen Hurts, trash. Going to get into his sorry ass along with Kellen Moore in a second, but that's neither here nor there. $51 million a year. This is an example of what not to do if you're the Dallas Cowboys. I wouldn't even go above that with Dak Prescott. I'll tell you why after all this. Kyler Murray, $46.1 million a year at 7. That is what it is. Almost up. Failure. Deshaun Watson, failure. $46 million a year. You don't want to be them. Patrick Mahomes, the best in the world, and obviously at this point in time looking like the best contract of all time. That worked out perfectly in their situation, but it's easy for it to work out perfectly when you're going to championships from the moment you start. Year 1, go to the AFC Championship. Year 2, as a starter, win the Super Bowl. Now you're sitting at 3 Super Bowls, 4 appearances. It was easy for them to get the most valuable player in franchise history by miles, the deal that they gave him. Dak has not done what Patrick Mahomes did to just easily get that deal. And you're lying if you say he has just based off of regular season numbers. Kirk Cousins, Dak's a lot like Kirk Cousins. I think he's better than Kirk Cousins, but he's a lot like him as far as career success. Josh Allen, a lot of people like to say Josh Allen's the second best quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he is. I don't think he's the third best. I don't think he's the fourth best. Does he deserve more than $43 million a year? Probably, if you look at it that way. But quite frankly, it's about winning. It's about championships, and I get it. It's really, really, really hard to do that. There's one team that's hogging most of them right now. They've won back-to-back. They've got 3 in 5 years. And oftentimes the best coach quarterback combination kind of dominates that until that coach quarterback combination dies off. And I say the Cowboys don't have that. They got a very good one, but they don't have a $60 million a year quarterback combo to do that. And quite frankly, it has been damn near 30 years since we've been to the Super Bowl or to a championship game. In fact, it's been 28, and I'm 27 years old. I've shown up every fucking year of my life that I can recall to win a championship and ready to do so, just like every great Cowboys fan does, right? And at some point, you got to look at a situation, understand the basic definition of what insanity is, and say, what have we done that is different than every other team that has won a championship? And I would say, obviously, we have not had, like I said, the best quarterback in the NFL at any point in time over this last 28 years, or the best quarterback coach combo in the NFL over the past 28 years, right? Let me pull up a list of the last 10 Super Bowl champions. start with that because this is kind of what I'm going to get into. Because as a team that's won 36 games, I can't say that enough over the last 10 years. I think that a big part of it is we've had a roster good enough. And so much of this, making the playoffs 3 years in a row, what I expect is going to be 4 years in a row, that'll be the first time that we've done that in my life. So that's part of the battle you're checking off right there. A lot of the reasons the Patriots won so many Super Bowls in the last 20 years is because they won that division every fucking year. And they handicapped it and they dominated it. And those other three teams were just screwed until the Patriot, Tom Brady, Belichick era was over, right? And so much of the battle is you're going to get, like, styles make fights when you get to the playoffs. And I'll be the first one to tell you we've run into some really bad matchups, which is part of the reason we've looked the way we've looked in some of these playoff losses. And that just is what it is. If you get there every single year, you're eventually going to get more luck and maybe get some better matchups that suit your team more to win and stay healthy and go along that journey to the Super Bowl, right? A la the Eagles 2 years ago, who had the easiest cakewalk to the Super Bowl I've ever seen in my life, playing the terrible fucking Giants, who the Cowboys blew out twice that year. They beat them with ease in the divisional round. And then Brock Purdy got hurt on the first drive of the game in San Francisco, and that game was over. They literally didn't have a quarterback to compete in that game. And so the Eagles were able to coast to a victory, go on to lose the Super Bowl. There's been some easier pathways than what the Cowboys have dealt with. But let's just talk about the last 10 champions at the quarterback position. You got Patrick Mahomes, Stafford, Brady, Mahomes, Stafford, Foles is an outlier, Brady, Manning, Von Miller was the MVP of that game, Tom Brady, and then Russell Wilson. So there's two outliers in hindsight now, the way Russell Wilson's career has played out post-Seattle, and then obviously Nick Foles. Those outliers, Russell Wilson was still in his rookie contract, the Legion of Boom, maybe the best defense in the modern history of the NFL, right? That's kind of what I'm going to get into on the way to do it without having the best quarterback in the league. The other outlier was Nick Foles, quarterback on a rookie deal, which was Carson Wentz. He had that MVP type season because the team was so fucking stacked that you're able to do that with a guy that's not really cut like that because you got weapons galore. They had Alshon Jeffries. They had a great running game. Obviously, one of the great offensive lines in modern history. Hall of Famers scattered across it, and then an elite defense. They go on to win the Super Bowl famously. Malcolm Butler gets benched for reasons that we will probably never know, I guess. Close game. Nick Foles pulls it out. They win that championship. Okay? Now let's talk about the other 8 champions. 7 out of the 10 are the 2 greatest quarterbacks these eyes have ever seen, in Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. The other 2 are surefire Hall of Famers in Peyton Manning and Matt Stafford. Those 2 guys were generational prospects coming out of high school, #1 players in the country. They go on to have great careers in the SEC, eventually become #1 picks in the NFL draft. Peyton Manning had his Colts career. Matthew Stafford had his Lions career, where he put up hellacious numbers year in, year out, MVP type statistics, but it was the Detroit Lions. Terrible coaching, terrible rosters. Ultimately gets traded to the Rams, resurrects all that, wins a Super Bowl. I think solidifies his Hall of Fame spot. So I say that to say, you're essentially going to win a Super Bowl one or two ways at the quarterback position. You're going to have a surefire Hall of Fame quarterback or a current MVP candidate, which you could say Dak Prescott is. Or you're going to have a quarterback on a rookie and or reasonable contract that allows you to load up your defense without any holes on it. And overall your team, surround them with weapons and all that stuff, and just have the best roster like the Niners do year in, year out, and try to win that way and ultimately defeat whoever the best quarterback that you're inevitably going to run into, right? And I would probably much rather do that 9 times out of 10 because, Patrick Mahomes ain't getting old enough to leave this league anytime soon. He's by far and away the best with, I think, the best offensive mind of all time, and arguably when it's all said and done might be the greatest coach of all time in Andy Reid. Like, that right there isn't going to be duplicated anytime soon. If it is, it's just a lot easier said than done. Whereas the Cowboys have clearly proven that they can build rosters at an elite level. They can draft probably better than anybody in the NFL can. And so finding the quarterback in the modern era just isn't as hard as it was. Go back to what Dak Prescott walked into. I'm going to tell you something. If this moves forward and Dak Prescott plays out this season, and I'll get into expectations of the season right after I finish up right here. Dak Prescott plays out this season, and we have a good year, but it ends similar to every other year of his soon-to-be 10-year NFL career, and it ends without us getting beyond the second round of the playoffs, and maybe we have a humiliating loss, or maybe he gets outplayed in that playoff game. I do not think that there's going to be teams, whether it be the Steelers, who ESPN's reporting could be an option long-term for Dak Prescott, whether it be the Raiders or any team that you get seen thrown in these graphics of potential landing spots. I don't think that those teams, especially if they're in position to draft in the top 10 of the draft, are going to be beating down the doors to sign Dak Prescott to a deal worth $300 million beyond the age of 30 when he hasn't been past the second round of the playoffs with some of the teams that he's had in Dallas. Right? Just be honest with yourself. Let's talk about the list of NFC quarterbacks. Okay, and this is just off the top of my head. Let me see if I can pull up a list real quick. But let's just go through it and be genuine and honest about who at least I would take personally above Dak Prescott. Sure as hell wouldn't pay more money to Dak than these guys. So let me see if I can pull up a list real quick. NFC quarterbacks in 2024. Well, let's just pull up all of them. Here's a list of Pro Football's top 10 list. All right. So they got Patrick Mahomes at number one. Obviously, logic would tell you don't pay. Forget the fucking cap structure. Forget how it works. Forget how, but he got paid 4 years ago now. I cannot swallow a pill to pay Dak Prescott more money than Patrick Mahomes, and I'm beyond and over the conversation of doing shit like that. We haven't won or sniffed the Super Bowl in 28 fucking years. Let's stop doing shit like paying our quarterback $12 million more a year than the best in the world at playing quarterback. Lamar Jackson, no. Joe Burrow, no. Josh Allen, no. Justin Herbert, no. So those are all AFC quarterbacks. Obviously, PFF, take their list for how you will. I'm not the biggest PFF guy in the world. I like their stats. It stops with that. But generally speaking, I think everybody thinks the top 5 quarterbacks pretty much exist in the AFC, at least the better part of it, right? They have Dak Prescott at number 6. PFF is obviously very, very heavy on stats. And I'll be the first to say, let's go back to it. I'll pull it up on the screen for you so you can see it. Dak Prescott, statistically, you're not going to find much better than that. 3rd in passing yards, 1st in passing touchdowns, tied for 95th in interceptions. That's whatever. He had 9 interceptions, less than 10. You'll live with that every day of the week, especially knowing he throws the ball a lot. 2nd in QBR. He had a great season. But let's go through his game log. There's a specific thing that I cannot get over in the context that is not described enough in this Dak Prescott conversation, especially on people in the camp of giving him the contract that he wants right now. The Giants, we opened up the season in the first 2 weeks winning by a combined total of 70-10 against the 2 New Jersey teams, and New York Giants and New York Jets. Right? We beat them by a combined 70-10. He goes berserk in both games. Well, actually, that first game, he only had a 54.2% completion percentage against the Giants, but that's because we were trying to score on every play and damn near did. And then we had the fart and fall down game against Arizona. Something about fucking Josh Dobbs, and every time we play Josh Dobbs, he gets the better of us. I don't know what it is, but we cannot stop Josh Dobbs. Then we go beat the shit out of the sorry-ass Patriots. The San Francisco game, 3 in a row. And if you remember and recall in this game, afterwards, Dak Prescott was quoted in saying by the AP that it was the most humiliating loss of his entire football career. And that is exactly what it looked like. I'm going to pull up CeeDee Lamb's game log too, just real quickly, to show you that there was a quick change post that San Francisco game between Dak, CeeDee, and overall the offense. Reception-wise, CeeDee had 4 against the Giants, 11 against the Jets, then 4 against Arizona, New England, and San Fran. Going back to that San Fran game for Dak, not only was he awful, seemed to be drowning that entire game, there were San Francisco defensive players that took major shots at him, saying that their game plan every single time they play the Cowboys is to put the game in Dak's hands because they know he can't do it and he can't beat them, right? He was overwhelmed by the pressure, overwhelmed by the overall speed and just athleticism by that defense and physicality. I think the team in general was. Tony Pollard always got his ass beat by Fred Warner. It was bad. But there was a lot of cut-ups after that game of CeeDee Lamb getting open and getting open a lot and not even getting looked at or having just a terrible, inaccurate ball thrown to him or whatever. It was Dak Prescott's worst game of the season until the Green Bay game. And it's a point in a game that I can't get out of my head. I can't get the last 3 losses of San Francisco out of my head when we're talking about making him the highest paid guy of all time. Okay? And then there's the Chargers. We beat the Chargers and Kellen Moore 20-17. Beat the Rams 43-20. Great game, 304 yards, 4 touchdowns. The first Eagles game we lost. Dak played fine. We absolutely should have won this game. The Eagles had a 11-1 start with a lot of ugly wins in that. 11-1 is 11-1, but the writing was all on the wall for the collapse after that for the Eagles. We really, really, really should have won that game. We didn't. Go on, beat the shit out of the Giants again. That's what we do to the Giants. Beat the shit out of Carolina. We beat the shit out of the Commies. So Dak Prescott is clearly at a point in his career, and especially with this Cowboys team, that he beats the piss out of really bad teams and mediocre teams, and he plays really well against them. And then we beat Seattle in what was really probably one of the best games of Dak Prescott's entire career, just from what I remember watching. Now, there were still moments in that game where his footwork, like in every game, is a little inconsistent, and that's kind of another thing when talking about making him the highest paid QB in the world, where he goes from a wide base to a narrow base to a wide base and just kind of gets happy feet every now and then, which leads to inaccurate throws to open guys where he's either throwing it behind them or sometimes he misses them. That's neither here nor there. He really, really played great against Seattle. So did Geno Smith. DK Metcalf really showed that he was a mismatch against Deron Bland in that game. Jackson Smith and Jigba looked really good. I think they got a fucking nice receiving core in Seattle. They get the right guy at QB. Future's bright there. Then we get the revenge against Philly. We're one of many teams that starts to just tee off on the shitbirds in Philadelphia. We beat them 33-13. Dominate them. Dominate Jalen Squirts. Win that game at home in Dallas. Go on, get our ass beat by Buffalo. It was a game in Buffalo, freezing ass cold. There was a stomach bug that went through the locker room at that time. We played bad all around on both sides of the football, but this is kind of the point. Championship contenders that we played this year. Let's list them off. San Francisco got our ass beat, right? Didn't mean to pull that back up. Got our ass beat. 42-10. They make fun of us. They mock us. The Eagles were not contenders. Fuck them. Buffalo, get our ass beat. 31-10. Josh Allen plays way better than Dak. Dak goes 21 for 34. I don't know why the fuck we threw the ball 34 times. Probably because we couldn't run the ball last year. 134 passing yards. Overall ugly game in windy-ass cold Buffalo is what it is. Go on, play their division rivals. Miami, big game for Miami. Big game. They were playing for home field advantage still at this point. We lose. It was Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. Yeah, Christmas Eve. We lose in Miami. Dak Prescott does not outplay Tua in this game. Not that it's just what it comes down to, but he had a 51.8 QBR. Okay, so let's talk about the contenders. We played San Fran, Buffalo, Miami, and Detroit. In these games, he had a 43.2 QBR against San Francisco. Abysmal. A 39.3. It somehow got fucking worse. I understand the weather was horrific in Buffalo. But again, guys that are going to get paid, in my eyes, if you're going to give the guy money, even Trevor Lawrence, at least they think he has the ceiling to be the best in the world. The Chargers think that Justin Herbert has the ceiling to be the best in the world. Jalen Squirts, Deshaun Watson, and who was the fucking other one? Let me pull out the list. Kyler Murray, bad deals. Those failed. You don't want to be in that category. Okay? Those other guys, those other teams, And obviously, those teams too, when they sign the guys, think that those guys have the ceiling to be the best in the world. When Dak Prescott, he has 10 years of evidence to show you what his QBR is and what he really looks like against the best teams in the league. Against Super Bowl contenders last year, he goes 1-4 with QBRs of 43.2, 39.3. 51.8 and 60.3. So when he plays the best teams in the NFL that likely have a good pass rush, good defense, a good secondary, that you can't abuse with your weapons like ABCD Lamb and Jake Ferguson and Brandon Cooks and other guys that you've had throughout your career. Going to finish on that you can't abuse with them. And you go play Green Bay, 42.9 QBR. That's what he is against the championship teams in the league. Let's stop acting like he's something different. And if he's ever going to get over the fucking hump, it'll take taking a contract closer to what Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins, and Patrick Mahomes make this right now, around $45 million a year in my eyes. That's what he deserves. I think that's fair. That is not a shot at him. You're still a top 10 paid quarterback in the world of football for the most valuable franchise in the world, where you will make more money off the field than anybody else ever will. You're basically the president of the United States if you're the Dallas Cowboys quarterback. In my eyes, that's what you are. That's what you are popularity-wise. That's the way you're viewed in the world of sports. All right? $45 million a year. We could give CeeDee Lamb, the best receiver in the world, the best receiver in franchise fucking history, the highest paid receiver contract of all time. We could re-sign Micah to what's going to be the highest paid non-quarterback deal of all time. Those guys deserve it because they're the fucking best in their field. Dak is not, and I don't know why we live in a world in social media where saying that somebody's not the best, that is not the best, is the fucking best. You're not taking those guys I listed earlier above Dak. You know who else I'm not taking over Dak? I'm not taking Dak over, sorry, I said that backwards. You're not taking Dak above these 5 guys on this list that you see on the screen. I'm also not personally taking him over Stafford, who's in the NFC. For sure would take him over Jalen Hurts. I'll take him over this old-ass Aaron Rodgers who doesn't care about football right now. You're definitely not taking him over C.J. Stroud. There is not a GM in the world that would rather have Dak Prescott than C.J. Stroud right now, and I'm sorry, he's not better than C.J. Stroud. You're not taking him over Jordan Love. Did we forget the last game that was played? And I know quarterbacks play 2 separate defenses. I get that. Jordan Love's ceiling way better than Dak Prescott's. You know who else's ceiling's better than Dak Prescott's? Trey Lance if he develops. Okay, Dak is 30 years old. Let's stop. Look at this list. Tua, Purdy, I don't know. He may be better than Purdy. Trevor Lawrence, whatever. Cousins, old. Jared Goff. Give me Jared Goff. And I'm being serious. This isn't just disingenuous. 27 fucking years old. I show up every year to win the Super Bowl. I want something to change. Go back to that list of top 10 of the last 10 Super Bowl champions. Let me show you something. Where's it at? Gotta pull it back up. I'm gonna pull it back up because I need to make a point. First round pick, 6th round pick, 6th round pick. The 6th round pick I'm speaking of is Tom fucking Brady. Okay? So get Tom Brady in the 6th round. Good luck. I don't know. Nick Foles was a mid-round pick, outlier. Tom Brady, 1st round pick, number 1 overall pick. Tom Brady. Russell Wilson, 3rd round pick. Okay? So the non-first round pick quarterbacks that win championships is Tom Brady, greatest fucking player ever, who, by the way, never was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Ever. Always took reasonable deals. Understand his wife was rich as fuck. Understand all that. Took reasonable deals. They were able to build teams without holes. Oftentimes on the defensive side of the ball, be complete. They always had an elite cornerback. Always had an elite defensive line. They could always stop the run. Always very, very solid defensively. And he's the greatest player of all time. Okay, Russell Wilson was on a rookie deal with an elite defense. Nick Foles, that quarterback, was on a rookie deal in Philly with an elite defense. Okay, so 1st round picks, and even go back 20 years. Aaron Rodgers, 1st round pick. Drew Brees, early 2nd round pick. Hall of Famer. Ben Roethlisberger, top 5 pick, Hall of Famer. Eli Manning, first number one overall pick, probably going to be a Hall of Famer. Peyton Manning, number one overall pick, probably going to be a Hall of Famer. Ben Roethlisberger, top 5 pick. Tom Brady, greatest ever. Brad Johnson, anomaly. Tom Brady, and then you're in the fucking 90s. So since the year 2000, Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, he won 7 Super Bowls. The rest of them are 90% of the time first round or top 5 picks in the NFL draft. They are consistently competing for MVPs, and they were all Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Dak Prescott, as of right now, is not a Hall of Fame quarterback. He needs the playoff success to become that. He is a very, very good quarterback. He is arguably the 3rd best quarterback in the history of the Cowboys franchise. He probably is, right? I think most people would say he surpassed Tony Romo. But where he's the same as Tony Romo is 2 playoff wins. And I don't think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. And he is going into the back end of his career. So the Cowboys either, and the last thing I'll say on Dak Prescott, I'll end it with that and kind of say what the Cowboys got to do. And then I'll finish the last 20 minutes or so of this show on the other shit going on with the organization and kind of just my expectations of this season and the future. But there's also a narrative that Dak doesn't have help or needs more help. I'm going to start from the beginning of his career to now and tell you how much fucking help Dak Prescott has had. If Dak Prescott didn't walk into a team that provided a shitload of help, he had the best offensive line in the NFL his rookie year. There was 3 Hall of Famers on that offensive line. Well, 2. Travis Frederick would have been a Hall of Famer if he didn't get a autoimmune disease that ended his career shortly. But you had 3 All-Pros on the offensive line. You had the best running back in the NFL with the rookie Zeke. You had Des Bryant, a Hall of Fame tight end, and Jason Witten. Sorry. Right? Right? That's what he walked into in the NFL. That was like the first 3 years of his career. As that team started to fizzle out in year 3, going towards the end of his rookie deal, I don't know if you recall or remember this, Dak Prescott was struggling a lot prior to the Amari Cooper trade. I have always said Amari Cooper saved Dak Prescott's career. Amari Cooper is one of the best route runners I have ever seen in my life. Of 27 years of watching football, or you could say 25, 24 years of watching football of recollection. And then obviously, I'm a historian of the game. I've watched a lot of guys. Amari's one of the best route runners I've ever seen. He's one of the best route runners of all time. He's amazing. He's still to this day one of the top 5 receivers in the NFL in my eyes. He's a quiet guy. He's out there in Cleveland. There's a lot of other guys to talk about. Amari Cooper is so fucking good. He showed up, and I think adding him saved Dak Prescott's career. And now, to Dak Prescott's defense, it wasn't his fault. Des Bryant's old as fuck. All that fell apart, and he didn't have a lot of weapons. And there's a lot of guys that wouldn't have been playing great with that offense at that time. Zeke had the suspension. We all know how that went, but it showed that Dak, without the dominant running game, was struggling, and that is why Dak didn't get signed early the first time, and we took it all the way to the finish line and giving him his first contract, okay? He turns it around. He comes back year 4, has a much better year at his time, best year of his career. He gets his deal. Breaks his leg for year 1 of his deal. That's neither here nor there. To go on with what he's been helped with, we've spent first-round picks on a tackle, on a receiver in CD Lamb, on all kinds of players to help Dak Prescott throughout his career. We have also signed guys like Brandon Cooks. Last year, we traded for Stephon Gilmore. We do all kinds of things. We've brought in Dak Prescott has had nothing but elite offensive lines pretty much the majority of his career. He had a Hall of Famer in Zach Martin all along the way. He just had another All-Pro that we drafted in Tyler Smith. He's had a good running game for the majority of it. We drafted, we used a first-round pick on CD Lamb, who's now a first-team All-Pro. He has all kinds of help. Jake Ferguson's one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Dak has help, and he's had help all along the way, and Dak wouldn't be where he's at without help. So erase and squash that fucking narrative. But what the Cowboys need to do is they either need to sign Dak Prescott to a reasonable contract, like I mentioned. They all got to come to terms with that. Or they need to move on from him, take the $45 million cap hit that's going to come next year. I think we have like $65 million in cap space going into next year without that. So, is what it is. You take that. Sometimes you got to go back so you can go forward and align yourself to draft the first round quarterback that you've had since Troy Aikman in 1989. The last one to win Super Bowls for you, and or the wild card and Trey Lance potentially developing under a very great QB developer and Mike McCarthy, who I'm about to talk about, and having the ceiling of the guys that I mentioned earlier that have a huge fucking ceiling in the NFL, right? And I say that to say, obviously, Dak's leverage existed with that cap hit and what's going to come next year. But I think the Cowboys are doing a thing where they're not only calling his bluff, but they're calling a lot of people's bluff and saying, you know what, we understand what everybody says, and we understand that it is quite frankly illogical to eat like $95 million in total in dead money and let this guy Dak Prescott eventually walk, right? But I think at the end of the day, if this season ends the way last season ended and the way every other season has ended in Dak Prescott's career so far in Dallas, then nobody else is going to give him that $60 million deal, and that we probably have a reasonable offer that we think he's truly valued at, and he could take it or leave it. Or we can move on with Trey Lance and somebody else. And that's what I think about that situation. But let's talk about other things in Dallas. And do a little Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia comparison. All right, obviously Jerry Jones made the all-in comments. They triggered a lot of people, like I said early on in the show. Let's talk about what the offseason looked at and what I think Jerry Jones means and how I actually, believe it or not, don't think he's lying when he says that, and think you just need to look at it a different way. Let me erase some of this Dak Prescott stuff just to get it off the fucking list. And then I'll get into it. All right. Jerry Jones said we were all in this offseason, and we made fewer moves than I think any other team in the NFL in free agency. And also, we haven't extended anybody that's up for an extension. So we just didn't make any kind of splash contractually. And we also got a head coach going into the last year of his deal. We signed a defensive coordinator to a 1-year deal. And we got a bunch of players and coaches alike in this organization that are on a prove it deal with the most valuable franchise in all of sports. Oftentimes you hear, Dallas, how are you so cheap? You're $2 billion worth more valuable than every other franchise in sports, and this, that, and the other. I don't think it has anything to fucking do with being cheap. And what I'll tell you I think it has to do with is the fact that we've gone 28 years without a Super Bowl, and we're worth so much, and we're the topic of discussion and the most watched team, and all of this stuff. You know, I think Jerry Jones and the organization, they hear all that, they know all that, and they feel all that. And I think that they truly are all in on winning a Super Bowl as soon as they possibly can. Is that this year? I think we can win one this year. Why is that? We have 9 AP All-Pros. On the offensive side of the ball, we have a tackle and a guard that's All-Pro, right? We drafted with the first-round draft pick a tackle that has that type of potential in his career. Might be baptism by fire early, but I think he's going to be very good this year and beyond eventually. We drafted a center in Cooper Beebe to really complete the entirety of what that offensive line already is, which is very solid. You know, you got an all-pro right guard, you got an all-pro left guard. You just drafted a left tackle to be the anchor of that offense moving forward and replace the great Tyron Smith. You drafted a center that could potentially be the captain of that offensive line, if you will. The steerer of the ship and really dominant in Cooper Beebe, who I'm very high on. Then you got a first-team All-Pro wide receiver. You got a tight end with All-Pro potential and a bright, bright future in Jake Ferguson. You got another great receiver in Brandon Cooks, and whoever else steps up. I mean, somebody else I think will step into that third role, whether it is a combo of Kevontae Turpin and maybe Deuce Vaughn in the slot, which I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with those two guys there. I'd love to see Kevontae Turpin get more action. He's an electric fucking football player. Or is it somebody else that steps up? Who knows? On the defensive side of the ball, you got 2 elite pass rushers, the best in the world in Micah Parsons, and then you got Tank Lawrence, who's had an excellent, consistent football career for the Dallas Cowboys. You got guys just chomping at the bit behind them like Sam Williams and others. The guy you drafted this year that you gave the number 94 to, his name Marcus Nealon or something like that. Sorry, off the top of my head, I'm talking a lot and getting a little scatterbrained. But yeah, anyways, you got a great pass rush. You do have holes to fill out in the run defense, and it's probably the reason, outside of maybe quarterback play in certain situations, why we're losing games in the divisional round of the playoffs. Need to address that. Need to address that however you fucking can. We obviously used a first round pick on Mozzie Smith last year. He's going to have a lot of responsibility quickly this year, so we're going to find out. But other than that, you signed some linebackers in Kendricks. You drafted one in Maurice Leofau, who I like a lot. You drafted one last year in DeMarvion Overshown, who I think will have a very good year. I think that they addressed the linebacker position that very desperately needed to be addressed. And you hired one of the greatest defensive coordinators of the last 30 years, Mike Zimmer, who's on a one-year deal, which is interesting, but he could also be the next coach of the Dallas Cowboys if this Mike McCarthy thing doesn't work out. Now, I don't want that not to work out. I'm very high on Mike McCarthy. I don't think 36 wins in 3 years is anything to sneeze at. I don't think anything he's done in his coaching career is anything to sneeze at. I like him a lot. But I just think that this Cowboys organization, the Jones family, the ownership, Will McClay, and the entire front office, scouting department, personnel department, the organization as a whole, I think that they feel just as desperate as we feel to win a championship, right? And I think that they look at that roster. You have 2 all-pro cornerbacks. Sorry, how did I forget Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland? Who else has 2 all-pro quarterbacks in the NFL? Nobody fucking does, okay? You look at this roster and you say this roster is just as good, if not better, or certainly better than the roster that won the Super Bowl last year in Kansas City and the roster that expects to win another one this year in Kansas City. This Dallas Cowboys team is a lot better than that team. Dak Prescott is working with better outside of the greatest tight end of all time and Travis Kelce, right? Outside of that, and obviously the offensive mind that is Andy Reid, which is a massive, massive thing. The Chiefs didn't have a receiver that knew how to line up on sides last year. They lost the game to the Bills because Kelvontae Turpin lined up fucking offsides. The refs tell you whether you're onside or offsides as a receiver before the play. And he still lined up offsides. And they lost the game because of it. He had absolute shit for brains and dumbasses as receiver. He had lawn chairs and washing machines as receivers last year, right? Just shit for brains. And he won the Super Bowl. Don't think the Cowboys don't notice these things as an organization. So that's why there's a stalemate with Dak, which I think ultimately leads to the potential holdout that I desperately don't want to happen with CeeDee Lamb. I think he should have been signed yesterday. But the Dak Prescott cap hit, which is ultimately his leverage, because it's the reason we can't do what we want to do organizationally, but it's also the reason I think we're saying, you know what? We're going to go try to win it all this year. And if we do, Dak Prescott gets signed, Mike McCarthy gets signed, unless they just decide to leave the most valuable franchise in the world of sports, which I don't think anybody's ever just decided to do. At least in my lifetime, they haven't. I don't think they will, and pass up on all the off-the-field money and all that stuff that comes with it. But if they win the Super Bowl, they're all getting what they want. Everybody's breaking the bank. Dak Prescott will be the highest-paid player of all time, and Dak Prescott will be a fucking Hall of Famer, right? So that's obvious. If they go to the conference championship, I think they get everything that they want. But if they don't, everybody walks. We take a cap hit and take some dead money next year that quite literally, with the transition of franchise quarterback to a new guy, and all of that, might mean that we don't win one next year, but it aligns us to win one as soon as possible. And I think that that is what Jerry Jones means when he says all in. Is yes, they're all in and winning a Super Bowl this year because they think that they're already good enough to win one this year. Quite frankly, you are going to need a little bit of luck when that time comes, but we're aligned to definitely get ourselves at least in the dance to maybe get some luck go that way, right? And that's what I think what he means by all in. I think that Mike Zimmer is one of the best defensive minds in all of football. He has a 30-year resume to prove that. He has a 30-year relationship with the Jones family. There's obviously a connection there. And I think the combination of what our offense is, what Mike McCarthy is as a QB coach, as a play caller in today's game, he has only improved. I think last year was in the top 5, top 4, top 3 of the league in play calling. He did an excellent fucking job. Combine that with what Mike Zimmer is, with the weapons he has to work with 2 elite cornerbacks, the best pass rusher in the world, some good young linebackers with also a veteran to go in the mix that's experienced with Zimmer and very, very smart. Mike Zimmer's going to field a very, very good defense. And we're in a division where this season we do have the best quarterback, right? And we do have the best coaching staff in the entire division. We'll see what the commies do with Dan Quinn and a rookie quarterback who I think is very good. But we'll see. They still have a lot of offensive line problems. They don't have the roster the Cowboys have. The Eagles, who I'm going to get into right now. Well, the Giants fucking suck. We're not talking about them. The Eagles we're going to get into right now, I think, are destined to have an epic meltdown that has already begun. And we don't want to repeat what they did and extend a guy that's potentially not only going to be, not one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but not even the best quarterback in his division. Jalen Hurts isn't on the same planet as Dak Prescott or the top players at the position in the league. I quite frankly don't think that I've ever seen a player as overhyped and overrated as Jalen Hurts. On the screen on YouTube here, I got the game log from last season pulled up, and then most of this is just going to be opinion and me going off the top of my dome as I look at it. But let's pull, as I said, this meltdown already began. All right, let's start with a 10-1 start to last year that the Eagles had, and I mentioned it earlier. It was all ugly losses. If you followed me on the socials during this time, you know that I was bashing them every single fucking week, calling them frauds. I have gone as far to put my entire legacy, not just as a sports guy getting into this content space, but as a man. My legacy as a fucking man is on the line, saying that the Jalen Hurts Nic Sirianni situation isn't going to work and can only end in a disaster in perfect Philadelphia filthy fucking fashion, right? The 10-1 start to epic collapse. Here was an article written by Frank Schwab, senior writer of Yahoo Sports, where he said 10-1 to one and done. Eagles' unbelievable collapse is complete after loss to Buccaneers. I quote, he said, with tackles, bad coverages, missed passes, a bad game plan, and even worse, body language was the reason for the collapse there at Philly, and I couldn't agree more. Couldn't have explained it better myself, Frank. Yeah. And you saw that throughout the first 10 weeks of the season. Like I said, let's talk about the contenders that the Eagles played throughout that time. They played Buffalo, Kansas City, and Dallas. Should have lost all of those. They played Miami as well, played pretty good in that. Yeah, I think that's where the list stops. Week 1, they had an ugly game against a shitty New England team who had the 3rd pick in the draft. Week 2, Minnesota, that was a close back and forth game from what I recall. They won. Minnesota fucking sucked. Week 3, they won 25-11 to the team that ultimately was their demise in the playoffs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They should have lost both games to Washington. Washington gave both of those games away. Sam Howell did the thing he did where he's like the white Jameis Winston, and he had a fucking million passing yards and touchdowns, but he also had like 3 interceptions and fumbles like 2 or 3 times and gets sacked a lot. Bad offensive line. It's not always his fault he got sacked. Sometimes it was. That's neither here nor there. A lot of these games, turnovers in situation like that, bail Jalen Hurts out and his bad quarterback play, and they ultimately win the game, right? They go on. They eventually lose to their first game to the Jets, beat the Dolphins, game repeat of the first game against Washington, beat Dallas in a bullshit fucking game where Jalen Hurts goes, and this is where it starts. He goes 17 for 23 for 207 yards, 73.9 completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 59.2 QBR, right? That is what Jalen Hurts is. That stat line, what I just read out, is what Jalen Hurts is. It's what he was at Alabama. It's what he's always going to be. Jalen Hurts is a quarterback that if you give him a great running game, you give him a great offensive line, you give him weapons, which he's had a lot these last 2 years, and you give him an elite defense, he can win a lot of games. He's a QB merchant. He can get a couple of stats here and there and get overblown and overhyped because of it. And any quarterback winning a fuckload of games is going to be overhyped. Look at Brock Purdy. Not even trying to shit on Brock Purdy, but he's not a top 5 quarterback and never will be. He processes things very, very fast. I can acknowledge that. He's not a top 5 quarterback. He's on the best roster in the league, right? Jalen Hurts, for a year of his career, was arguably on the best roster in the league, and that's the best year he's ever going to have. Last year, he had 3,800 passing yards, 14th in the NFL, 23 passing touchdowns, 13th in the NFL, tied for 13th, 15 interceptions, shitty, worse than Dak Prescott's worst year of his career last year where he had 10, and the Eagles talked about it all fucking offseason long. And then 60.1 QBR, 12th in the league. This is what he is. At his very, very best, Jalen Hurts is maybe the 15th best quarterback in the NFL, right? I'm not the only one that thinks that. Here's a tweet for you. Let me pull it up. But I just get this full screen. Nick Wright on Fox Sports 1, he questions, is Jalen Hurts a top 15 quarterback in the NFL? He says, I do think it's a legitimate conversation of do we know, is Jalen Hurts good? And are we certain Jalen Hurts is a top 15 QB in the NFL? There's only 32, so are we certain he's better than the average league starter? I'm not. He said, are we certain is Jalen Hurts good? He didn't say, is he a top 15 guy? That was the second question. That's been my question for years. Is he even fucking good? Go beyond that Dallas game. Let's see what he did against Buffalo, another contender. 18 for 31, 200 yards, 57.1 QBR. San Francisco, they get their shit beat in, 42-19, just like they would have in that NFC Championship if Brock Purdy doesn't get hurt the third play of the game. This exposed that. He goes 26 for 45, 298 passing yards, goes on to have a 37.2 QBR. Rematch against Dallas, 38.5 QBR, gets blown out, 197 passing yards. 143 passing yards against Seattle, 56.8 QBR. Goes against the sorry-ass fucking Giants. Plays the best game down the stretch that he had played against anybody. 69.4 QBR. Actually, I take that back. He had a good game against the terrible Cardinals in which they ended up fucking losing, just like we did. 77 QBR. Loses the last game to the Giants that he didn't play in. I guess it didn't matter. And then the playoff loss where he goes 25 of 35 for 250 yards, 71.4 completion percentage, and a 40 QBR. He is fucking awful. Jalen Hurts, the record is out on him, okay? And there is a long list of people that are still in denial on Jalen Hurts. One, because they're either Eagles fans, or two, they rode Jalen Hurts' cock the entire offseason last year, entire season, throughout this bullshit 10-1 start that everybody with eyes that was being unbiased knew was bullshit. And now they have to die into that pit that they crawled into. They have to lay in the bed that they made with Jalen Hurts. He's not good. He's the same guy that lost his job at Alabama to a better quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa that had to come in, bail them out, and win the national championship game. And then it goes beyond that. And then they hired Kellen Moore this offseason. You know, for all the talks of how the Cowboys offseason was this abysmal offseason, and if you turn on ESPN at any fucking point in time and they're talking about the Dallas Cowboys or the NFL, you would think that the Dallas Cowboys, who have the fourth best odds to win the Super Bowl this year, mind you, are going into this league year with no shot. That they're going to be 500 at best with the energy and attitude that the national NFL media gives off about the Dallas Cowboys. But let me remind you, a lot of that NFL media either worked for the Philadelphia Eagles organization at one point, literally worked for them, like your Daniel Jeremiah's, Louis Reddicks of the world sports media, or they worked in Philadelphia media at some point in time, like Stephen A. Smith, Al Paladonio, and many, many, many others that have been through the city of Philadelphia and Philadelphia sports media, right? So there's a natural Philadelphia Eagles and Philadelphia sports glazing that happens in sports media that's happened my entire life. That's total fucking fugazi bullshit. Philadelphia is a dump of a city. They're ranked like the third filthiest city in America. They don't even pick up their trash off the ground. They threw batteries at Santa Claus. We celebrate it. They're fucking miserable human beings because they live in a miserable place, and they got miserable sports franchises that do nothing but humiliate them after they set the standard high. It's hilarious that is what the Dallas Cowboys, five-time Super Bowl champion, won more games than anybody in the NFL. We're put in that box because of the last 30 years, and it's fair. We're under a curse right now. But that is what the Philadelphia sports franchises, all of them together, are as a whole. They're a disappointment. And that's what the Eagles are going to be this year under the Kellen Moore Nic Sirianni regime, right? Jalen Hurts has talked to this offseason recently in the last few weeks, made a few headlines saying that every 95% of the Eagles offense is going to be different. I've heard that before with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore's history as an offensive coordinator is nothing but underwhelming and a complete fucking failure, right? He got catapulted probably too quickly to that role in Dallas. He was very, very valued as a backup quarterback coming out of Boise State. He did a great job in that role in Dallas. He just sat there, played his fucking role, never threatened the starter, learned, obviously was always going to be a coach. He gets the quarterback coach's job when he retires from his ankle injury. Fast forward, Jason Garrett gets fired. He gets the offensive coordinator job. I think he even had play calling duties for like 3 or 4 games under Garrett before he got stripped. Garrett didn't like him. Bring in Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy decides to retain him, allow him to call plays. They never fucking get along. I don't think Mike McCarthy was ever impressed with his play calling or just anything that he did as an offensive coordinator. Every year, what we did is we started off hot and finished poorly. His last year in Dallas was the infamous Dak Prescott 2022 season that I'll bring up with all of the interceptions. What have you, Dak Prescott in 2022? I said he had 10 interceptions. He had 15. Jalen Hurts had 16. That's fucking hilarious. He had a 91.1 QBR, 2,800 passing yards in, I think, 12 games played, and 15 interceptions. One of the worst years of the modern second half of Dak Prescott's career, if not the worst year of the second half of his career. Just inconsistent QB play. He had games with big numbers, a lot of interceptions. Now let's go to Justin Herbert's 2023 stats, where Kellen Moore had a cup of coffee in LA last year. Justin Herbert in 13 games had 3,100 passing yards and 20 touchdowns with more interceptions than he had. I think he had 7 interceptions. By far the worst year of his NFL career. All right? So far, Kellen Moore has had the opportunity to coach an AP All-Pro in Dak Prescott, AP All-Pro quarterback, the MVP runner-up the year Kellen Moore walked out the fucking door. Justin Herbert, who a lot of the sports world and NFL world anointed as the next great one, with obviously a ceiling through the roof and a guy that's kind of looked at as the prototype quarterback. He went there and made him worse and got fucking fired. And now I'm supposed to expect that Kellen Moore and Nic Sirianni are supposed to do better than what they did with Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert. They're supposed to be better than what Kellen Moore did with Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert with Jalen fucking Hurts, who was 14th, 13th, and 12th in yards, touchdown passes, and QBR in the NFL, with 95% of the offense changing. What's changing? Is the running element changing? Because Kellen Moore's never ran an offense with a running quarterback or being running quarterback centric. And I don't think Jalen Hurts is even close to being the most elite running quarterback in the NFL. I think that he's athletic and good enough at running and strong enough, obviously, to be a branch of the running game when it is good. When it is bad, I think he's mediocre and he doesn't threaten anybody. But anyways, Kellen Moore doesn't fucking major in QB run game. He doesn't major in that whatsoever. He comes from that playground bullshit Boise State stuff that is advanced now in the NFL. But Kellen Moore has been abysmal as an offensive coordinator, and that offseason move is supposed to be better than what the Cowboys have done? Let's compare. Kellen Moore, Mike Zimmer. Who's fucking better? Mike Zimmer could be an NFL head coach starting next year. He already was, and he was successful doing so. Mike Zimmer's had 30 years of fucking success, way more than Kellen Moore. So we won as far as coaching moves in the offseason. We didn't have to fucking fire anybody. We replaced our coordinator because we got a head coaching job. You replaced your coordinator because he got fired and hired another guy that got fired. But whatever. The Eagles are a lot more aggressive than Dallas. The Eagles seem to want to win way more than Dallas. Didn't win the division last year. Let's move on. What else are the Eagles going to do? Oh, they bring in Devin White. The Eagles sign in Devin White. We signed Kendricks. I like our signing more. Devin White was a guy who at one point in time I thought was arguably the best linebacker in the league. I thought the world of Devin White. Starting last season when I heard he was on the trade block, I wanted the Cowboys to go after Devin White. Was it ever possible? Probably fucking not. But I had that much admiration for him. But what I do know is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not only did he have the worst year of his career to follow up with his trade demand, the Buccaneers let him walk and couldn't get him out of the locker room fast enough. So the Eagles, who had an abysmal defense, couldn't stop a cold last year, one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. I understand they addressed that in the draft, like we addressed some of our issues in the draft. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I think the Cowboys addressed their issues in the draft and it'll be great. The Eagles won't fix their issues through the draft. I'm not going to say that. But what I will say is I'm also not going to act like the Eagles automatically fix their fucking issues and are better off than the Cowboys, who have 2 all-pro cornerbacks already. right? So I just don't understand where all this fucking hoopla with guys like Devin White and Saquon Barkley, by the way, who hasn't scared anybody since 2016 in the Big Ten. Saquon Barkley isn't a threat to anybody. If the Dallas Cowboys organization signed Devin White and Saquon Barkley, it would not get the same positive response that the media has given to the Eagles for making those two signings. Kellen Moore, if he signed anywhere but the Philadelphia Eagles, nobody would be bragging about it. Nobody. He was a failure in Dallas, and he was a failure at the Chargers. The Dallas Cowboys got a lot better and had the MVP runner-up at quarterback, the best offensive year we have had maybe in my fucking lifetime, probably, the moment he walked out the door and Mike McCarthy took over. Let's see what the Chargers do the moment he walks out the door and it's Jim Harbaugh at the reins. Let's see how much better Justin Herbert gets. And then let's also see, does Jalen Hurts improve from 14th best in passing yards? Does he improve from 13th best in passing touchdowns? Does he improve from 12th best in QBR? I think that is as good as it is ever going to get. Do the Eagles have weapons? They absolutely do. A.J. Brown's one of the best receivers in the league. Devontae Smith is good. Dallas Goedert is a fucking stud and a matchup issue, and he always has been for Dallas. I will say that. But Jalen Hurts makes those guys worse. They elevate Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts does not elevate those players. I think the Eagles have the most overrated franchise in the history of the sport. And I think the Cowboys, to finish that conversation, I think the Dallas Cowboys, and really to wrap up this episode, I don't really have time for anything else. Just going to get into a little boxing, but don't have time. I think that the Dallas Cowboys are primed to not only have another great 12-win season or close to that, but they're going to be the first repeat division champions in the NFC East since 2004. I think for position, the Cowboys are the best at almost every position group in the entire division. I think we by far have the best coaching staff in the division, and we have one of the best rosters in the NFL, which is why we have the fourth best odds to win the Super Bowl. To finish off everything that I said about Dak Prescott, I want to close off by saying I think Dak Prescott's a very good quarterback that's going to have a very, very good season. I think Dak Prescott can win a Super Bowl. I think he can win a Super Bowl with this Dallas Cowboys roster that exists currently if the dominoes fall or the cards fall in the right place, if you will, going into the playoffs. Where the right matchups away, just like everybody is from making it there. And if Dak Prescott can raise his level of play in the playoffs to a level that he, quite frankly, has never been able to get to, not only in the playoffs, but against contending teams year in, year out, then everything changes and he deserves everything he's asking for. But I say all that to say, I do think this year he's going to have another excellent season, barring injury, knock on wood. And I think the Cowboys overall will be one of the best teams in the NFL and competing for Lombardi number 6. So after this conversation this day, it's the end of the contract conversations for me. We're close to training camp. The focus for me as a Dallas Cowboys fan is Lombardi number 6, baby. And I want everybody to get tunnel vision on Lombardi number 6 because it's feasible, it's doable, and we're fucking coming for it. Stop the whining, stop the pouting. The offseason's over. The season's here. We're primed and ready to go. I love you guys more than you know, not as much as you think. Subscribe to my channel. Follow me on the socials. Have a good day, and God bless.